This video portrays a suicide bomber from the well-known terror organization ISIS. He had strapped a bomb to himself and had attempted to kill the chief of police, but he did not succeed. So what could motivate someone to join an organization known for such heinous acts and, if needed, kill themselves? Ultimately, how do large-scale terrorist organizations gain large followings? In today's presentation, we will focus on ISIS, but first we will summarize ISIS as a whole. It is a branch of the Al-Qaeda terrorist group, which was responsible for 9/11. Their main goal is to create a caliphate state. They have taken responsibility for 90 terrorist attacks in 21 countries, and as of 2015, they have had over 3,500 slaves, as of the most recent counts in 2015. This is a map recounting the different terrorist acts around the globe, and here are just a few of ISIS's slaves. Some common misconceptions of those in terrorist groups are that they are indifferent to the lives of animals and humans. Also, most terrorists are not mentally ill. When would-be suicide bombers were interviewed, none were psychotic, meaning none had mental disorders that would impair their perception of reality, and only half reported even being suicidal. Most terrorists are not motivated by religious fanaticism either. The normal terrorist will have normal empathy and compassion, as most people do. Most terrorists are people under 30 looking for their identities, and most of the time they feel as if they're invincible and cannot imagine coming into real harm. Younger people are also more impressionable and reckless than older people. As for psychological motivations, those who newly join are young and looking for identities. Similar to the way that people are motivated when they first begin a diet or weight loss plan, they're eager to follow the rules, but as time goes on, they begin to settle in and begin to ignore the rules, which is why terrorist groups are always looking for younger people. Many of these followers are also self-radicalized. By becoming friends with people who have these ideals, they begin to believe them more and more. The terrorist groups also will promise glory, adventure, and purpose, which seems like a promising offer to those who do not feel as if they're adequate internally and see the horrible terrorist attacks as achievements. They're also motivated by love over fear because they believe what they are doing with these terrorist groups is going to make the world a better place. Finally, the most compelling piece of psychological motives is well explained by the famous psychology experiment, the Bobo doll experiment by Alfred Bandura. They took videos of children's teachers or other prominent role models in their lives beating up a Bobo doll in very specific ways, for example using a hammer or distinct verbal phrases. Then each child was put into a room with the Bobo doll, and many followed the violent example put forward by the adults. This proves that violent or aggressive behavior can be taught to children through observation alone, so if while growing up they are constantly subjected to violent behaviors, such as those of a terrorist group, they will more likely become numb to them and repeat them in the future. Based on the studies of Brookings writer J.M. Berger, there is a 5-step process to ISIS recruiting online. The first is discovery of a possible recruit. The second is where ISIS members and/or supporters surround the potential recruit and talk to them. Third is isolation. This is where the supporters convince the recruit to stop communicating with people such as family, friends. Fourth is shifting to private communications. In this step, the recruit is convinced to continue communications through private messaging. The fifth and final step is identifying and encouraging action. This is when ISIS recruiters figure out what the recruit is going to do to aid the terrorist organization and then encourage them to do it.
Propaganda is a widely used tactic among any organization. Propaganda is information, especially of biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view. Extremists, someone adhering to an ideology that is considered far outside the acceptable mainstream attitudes of society, and terrorists, someone who uses violence and fear against non-combatants in order to achieve a political goal, become online friends with possible recruits by exhibiting their luxurious lifestyle. Many videos and graphics have been made to attempt to persuade people to join ISIS. ISIS's lifestyle, which they call 5-star jihad, is displayed through extravagant hotels and expensive cars. For example, in May 2015, its media channels announced the reopening of a luxury hotel in Mosul. Recruiters get jobs as teachers and manipulate their students into thinking their terrorist organization is good. They tell the world, "We fight for God, you fight for man-made laws," insinuating that to be close to God, you must join their group. Social media is one of the most influential manners of gaining a following. Other and earlier terrorist organizations, such as Al-Qaeda, haven't been as successful in using propaganda as ISIS. By using Westerners, for example, Jihadi John, a British Muslim executioner who came to Syria in 2012, ISIS is able to catch the attention of almost every news outlet, allowing them to gain attention and recruit more followers. The New York Times reported that foreigners make up half of ISIS's fighting force, and over 4,000 are from Western countries. Many ISIS recruiters are young women who go on Twitter and Tumblr and update their followers about their lives by portraying ISIS territory in an extremely positive way. On the night of November 13th, Paris was bombed and shot up. One of the gunmen posted a picture on Instagram earlier that day with the caption, "By the time the world knows this face, it will be too late." There are many ISIS Twitter and Instagram accounts. A popular way to communicate for ISIS was the messaging app Telegram. They used an encrypted language to pass messages back and forth. However, when it was discovered, ISIS created its own messaging app. Recruiters use messaging apps like Kik to give advice on how to cross into Syria, and ISIS has created brochures on how to get there and what to pack. Recruiters can also arrange for an ISIS member to meet up with the new recruits in Turkey to help them across the Syrian border. ISIS's goal is to remove potential barriers of entry, which helps foreigners to swell their forces in the Middle East. ISIS tells potential recruits that if you are a Muslim, you are already part of the caliphate. Maher said, "So even if you are too fat or too old to be a fighter, we'll find something else for you to do. You have a right to emigrate. We'll find a place for you." Over time, newcomers become more accustomed and exposed to the terrorist propaganda and start to feel like many others agree with it. They begin to feel like they are part of a community, and the new online friends start to feel like real friends. Some people will forget that terrorism is evil and believe their friends' viewpoints without needing justification, and they will naturally use or advocate for violence. All in all, using the typical profiles and psychological motives of those who enter terrorist groups can help us understand how they gain such large followings, as well as understanding the process in which they use to gain followers, including propaganda, can also help explain how they target specific people for their terrorist groups.